As a kid, I had subscriptions to newspapers, magazines. I bought sports books. Like, that was the way that I consumed information, and I was willing to pay for it. But that all changed with this darn internet. Through my lens, the quality has suffered. But there is change available. The Athletic started in January of 2016, a subscription model in a world of free real estate. Many of the absolute best reporters in the sports industry are on this platform. When you have a subscription model like The Athletic, you have to be accurate, you have to be thorough, you have to be innovative, or else you lose your customer base. Today's guest, Evan Parker, is one of the leading architects of this project. He and his team work hard to help create sports content that matters and is worth paying for. Here is Sports Business Journal 40 Under 40 award recipient and SVP General Manager of The Athletic, Evan Parker. Hey, Evan, what's happening, man? Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Brian. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this is really exciting for me as somebody who's come up in the content side of sports media, and just to be able to talk to somebody in your position at The Athletic, I'm really excited about. But one of the things I always like to get into is, people's origination story a little bit. So as you kind of look back and you think about your career and those kind of, important moments throughout, when did you kind of figure out that sports was going to be your career path? When did you say to yourself, like, this is more than just something I enjoy being a part of, this is something I want to do for my life's journey?
I'm probably like everybody else that you've ever talked to about working in sports, where I thought I was going to play professionally or something like that. And obviously that wasn't ever going to be in the cards. And I figured that out at a relatively early age, that I wasn't going to be able to play, but I knew that I wanted to be in the industry. And so I thought that the best path for me to work in sports was going to be through journalism, through writing or broadcast. And it was just something that I always loved. I grew up in LA. And we had Vin Scully and Chick Hearn, Bob Miller doing play-by-play. And, we had incredible writers for the LA Times, Jim Murray, who I got to read, every week. And so if you're a kid and you get the newspaper, like a physical newspaper that arrives at your front door, I would spend every morning before school poring over box scores and reading columns and reading about whatever happened the night before. Just like a lot of kids, I wasn't allowed to watch TV all night. I didn't often see the games. We didn't have cable, so I'm sitting there and seeing what the Lakers did the night before, or reading what Jim Murray has to say about whatever the big topics in sports were. And it gave me this idea that this was a path that I could be a part of the sports industry and get paid to cover games. And so high school was, working on the student newspaper. I went to sports broadcasting camps, which in retrospect sounds incredibly nerdy, but it was a lot of fun.
But in a good nerdy way. I like that.
Good nerdy way. And so I got to do all of that. And I went to the University of Maryland and was a journalism major. And I spent my time in college working at a TV station as a cameraman and on the radio doing play-by-play and writing and doing whatever I could to kind of get into the sports world. And I realized somewhere along the way that being a writer, being a broadcaster was a really hard path.
Yeah.
And, I was at Maryland. I won't forget it. I was covering, doing play-by-play for Maryland men's basketball. They won the national championship my freshman year. And for 4 years, I get to sit courtside and get to, opine about the games or tell people what's going on for a radio station where, if two people were listening, I would have asked them what the hell they were doing right then, but they were listening to me versus anything else they could do. But I was covering some of the best sports in America from a collegiate level. And I realized as I was getting close to graduation that the ability for me to get back to that point, to be covering a Maryland men's basketball game as a professional broadcaster, was going to be almost an impossible task. There just aren't that many roles for it. And I saw a lot of the people who were, older than me in school go to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania and Syracuse, New York, and kind of these small towns and doing minor league baseball, trying to make their way up the ladder to get back to where I was when I was in college. Now, again, nobody was listening, but I was at least, covering
at a certain level. Yeah.
And I had this moment of like, I can't do this. I just don't want that path. I don't know that I'm cut out for it. And so now I've got to figure out another way. And I got really lucky. A buddy of mine in college was interning at a radio station and didn't know a ton about sports, knew I did, and knew that was kind of the path that I wanted. He got called by the radio station to go to, Washington football team, the local NFL team. Obviously, go over to the practice facility. Joe Gibbs had just come back for a second stint as head coach. Gibbs is going to be doing a press conference. we don't want you to ask anything. We don't want you to do anything. We just need you to have a tape recorder or shove it in, in front of his mouth when other people are asking questions so he can get the sound for the radio. And he was too embarrassed, shy, or generous. I don't know which to this day,
Yeah.
but he asked if I could go instead of him. And so I went and I brought a resume and I gave it to the at the time the director of PR for the team, Patrick
Bold
Winston.
move. I like it.
You don't know how many shots you're gonna have. And I gave him
Yeah.
the resume and I said, I'm going into my senior year and would love to work in sports business. And so, I would love to work for the team. And I got lucky that they had an internship program. They didn't pay you. I got paid in the press box through sandwiches. And as a college kid, it actually didn't bother me that much that at least I knew on Sunday I was going to eat well.
Yep.
And that was my first introduction that there was this whole world of sports outside of playing, being a coach, being a general manager, or being a broadcaster, that there was this whole business aspect to it that I didn't know existed. And, now today my job is to help writers and editors, the people that I thought I was going to become, help them do their best work, help them create really good content for sports fans. And so it feels like it's a full circle thing. I'd be lying if I said it was in the path
Yeah.
that I kind of like plotted my career to get to where I am today. But I'm fortunate that, when you look back to what I was doing when I was 12, 13 years old, thinking I was going to be a sports journalist, now my day is spent with sports journalists and every waking moment I'm thinking about ways that I can make their jobs easier, make their jobs better so that sports fans all over the world are able to consume content.
I love it. And it's such a similar story to one that I shared my background too, except I was in Boston. So we were kind of polar opposites in some ways and probably cheering against each other a lot as I was a Celtics fan. But it's similar path, just knowing that was something that you were super enticed by, the storytelling aspect of it. And then also knowing that a lot of people started in Pocatello, Idaho or Bozeman, Montana and built their way up that way. And that can be a pretty hard road. You talked about, Washington football team and University of Maryland experience and then the Athletic, but you had some stops in between too. One of your first stops, you spent a long time at NASCAR, but one of your first stops was also at Edelman, which is one of the largest global PR agencies out there. You started as an account executive and you were on the marketing side a little bit. Did that broaden your view even further into the kind of world of sports business and all the different opportunities that are out there?
Absolutely. And I actually didn't start on the Edelman side in sports. So I was hired coming out of college. I was able to get an internship with Edelman and I was going to be on the Lakers account. And it was CSR for the Lakers. So it was doing their community events and things like that. And so I accepted the job. I was going to start 2 weeks later. And the 2 weeks between me starting or accepting and starting, the woman who oversaw the account left the agency and took the account. So the Lakers was no longer going to be my path. And I'm sitting there like, I've got this dream job.
Yeah, now what?
LA kid,
Yeah,
working for the biggest PR firm in the world, working on the team that you grew up rooting for. Like, you couldn't get better. And I got lucky that Edelman felt bad about the situation, and they gave me an opportunity to work on the Xbox business. It wasn't sports though, and so I spent 3 years on Xbox, where I was doing consumer PR for, at the time, it was the largest tech launch, consumer technology launch in history. And it was really cool. It was video games, right? I mean, I'm not saying that I like wasn't able to do the Lakers and I ended up getting stuck on, some kind of weird account that had nothing to do with my passion.
Right.
So it was something, I'm like just out of college.
Xbox is still pretty cool. Yeah.
Still cool.
Yeah.
But it wasn't sports. And I had to spend a lot of time. Edelman had a pretty large and thriving sports practice, and I wasn't part of it. So I had to spend a lot of time on the Xbox business, elbowing my way into anything sports related. So if somebody mentioned ESPN or if they mentioned the NBA or something like that, my hand went up. I want to work on that. I want to be involved. And I was able to wrestle away a couple different projects that were sports adjacent and get enough of a relationship going with the actual sports department at Edelman that I was able to attend some of their meetings. I could hang out with them. I could read Sports Business Journal when I picked it up off their desks and things like that. And little by little, I was able to convince them that I was better suited for their team than the business that I was on. So about 3 years in, I made the switch over. At the time, it was called Matter. Now it's UEG. It's a joint venture between UTA and Edelman. And even that job, which I did for 3 years, was still sports adjacent because it was entertainment and sports. And so a lot of my clients had nothing to do with sports. Amtrak doing National Train Day, nothing to do with sports. Yeah. I had a AstraZeneca client, Vimovo, which was osteoarthritis for women over the age of 60, nothing to do with sports.
Not close to sports, nope.
But I was able to get on the Armor All and STP account and do NASCAR projects. I got to go to the
Okay.
Super Bowl and do a Pepsi project. So these little things that like allowed me to say that I was working in the sports, build my
Yeah.
network, meet people in the sports industry. Even though 85% of my day was doing stuff that wasn't sports, I had enough that I was able to, kind of grow
Still
in
feel
direction
relevant
that I
in it.
wanted.
Yeah.
Still feel relevant and still have something that I could talk to people about that, hey, I am in sports, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like this is a lesson. People are like, I'm not doing what I want to do, and so they just think that what they want to do is not attainable because they're not doing it right then. But if you just get a little piece here and there that connects you, allows you to talk to people about it, allows you to say, I was just doing this cool project or whatever it is, people start not. I don't want to say that they believe you're in sports, like I was lying to them, but I think that they sort of accept you as being one of
Hmm.
theirs, and it allows you to get other experiences. And I was able to use the entertainment background I had at Edelman, the sports adjacent background I had at Edelman, to go get a job at NASCAR doing sports and entertainment for a sports league. So it was an entertainment based job at NASCAR, and it was not. I didn't want to be an entertainment marketer, but I've always looked at my career as like, what are you doing now? What have you done in your past that can get you to where you want to go
Yeah.
eventually? And I wanted to work in sports. I wanted to be as deep into sports as humanly possible. And NASCAR wasn't going to hire me, a guy who worked at Edelman on entertainment projects to run the races. They weren't going to hire me to do brand marketing. I mean, I didn't have the right experience for the job that I wanted at the league, or any league for that matter.
Yeah.
But I knew entertainment, and they needed somebody who knew entertainment and could bring an entertainment mindset and build entertainment projects and partnerships for the league. And that got my foot in the door. And then I was able to get deeper and deeper into sports until I have a job like I have today.
So NASCAR is a pretty intense fan base, and you mentioned this experience with football and basketball, being a Lakers fan, Maryland basketball, etc. When you get to a place like NASCAR, and that is a fan base that is very smart, knows their sport, and it's like a very passionate. It always intimidated me, I would say, because I didn't grow up with NASCAR quite the same way as other people do. How big of a shift was that for you? What was that environment like to get in with and feel like there's a bit of a learning curve or a barrier to being able to
Absolutely.
speak the right language to the audience?
I didn't grow up with the sport either. I grew up in
Yeah.
LA. It's not a hotbed for NASCAR here in LA. I'd never watched a race until I was in college, and I had a roommate that watched some of the big races, and so I was able to watch a few. But it wasn't a sport that I had a lot of experience in. When I got to
Yeah.
Edelman, I was working on STP and Armor All. I was able to go to a couple races because of my clients, and it gave me an appreciation for the sport. I was able to go walk around the pits and see the cars up close, and I could smell the gasoline and hear the engines and see these drivers kiss their wives and hop into the
Yeah.
cockpit of the car and go drive 200 miles
The
or
drivers kiss
hour
the
around the
wives,
track.
just to be clear. Not
Yes,
you.
right.
Yeah.
Not me. I would know. Not me. And these cars that are inches away from each other, and these
Yeah.
guys are going ungodly fast. And it gave me this appreciation. I'm like, okay, this is a really cool sport. I didn't grow up
Yeah.
with it, but now I understand it a little bit more and I appreciate it. And so when I had the opportunity, I wasn't looking for a job at NASCAR. I got called. Somebody again, you build a network in this sport, in this industry. If you don't have a network, it's pretty difficult to kind of make your way. And I got a call from the guys at NASCAR saying, we heard about you. We think you'd be the right fit for this role, and are you interested? And I was able to kind of talk my way in the interview of like, all right, I've been to some races. I know
Yeah.
what I'm talking about. I'm not an expert, but you're looking for an entertainment guy in LA. How many of the entertainment guys in LA are experts in NASCAR? So I knew enough to kind of be dangerous. But I spent 8 years in the sport. I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina for five of
Yeah.
them. The passion that NASCAR fans have for their sport is hard to compare. I mean, I'd say in the U.S. there's probably nothing like it. You'd have to go to Europe and Premier League fans
Yep.
and things like that to kind of see that level of passion where it's not
And
just a
knowledge
sport that
and
they
yeah.
watch. Totally, it's not just like something that they like. It's a way of life. It's
Yeah.
a culture. It's their community that people who say they save up their money, they save up their vacation days so they can go to a race every year. And they have their RV in the exact same spot. And everybody around them are these people that they don't really talk to for 360 days out of the year, but for 1 week, they're all living together, they're all friends, and this is like their connection point. And you don't see that in a lot of other sports. So it gave me a huge appreciation for NASCAR, for the fan base that's there, and for what the league has to do to kind of cultivate that fan base, to build that fan base, while also trying to broaden it, while also trying to get people who are like you and me who didn't grow up with the sport
Yep.
and get them to pay attention and get them to engage.
It's crazy. Like I'm listening to this and thinking to myself, like I started out at a national sports network, so I was used to covering the national, storylines. And then I went to Fox Sports Northwest, where I was just based in Seattle, and I was covering those teams. And when I first got there and I was the news director, and I was like, everybody here knows more legacy knowledge about these teams, the history, the little nuances of the story than I do. And it was so intimidating for me. And I can almost hear that coming from your experience going to NASCAR and feeling that pressure a little bit of knowing like, there's a lot of stuff I don't know, and yet I'm in a pretty powerful position. You took on management role at NASCAR too as you developed. Put that all together for me. Like it's a big jump going from individual contributor, managing accounts, whatever, to then managing budgets and people and expectations and strategy. And now you're doing it in something like NASCAR, which is, as we said, a very intense fan base. How is that transition for you, adding management responsibilities into this sport that was somewhat almost new to you?
Totally. And you add to that, I was doing entertainment work, which was valuable to the league in terms of getting more exposure, but not valuable to the core participants in the league in terms of what they thought was important for the
Okay.
sport. So you've got the officials, the senior management team at NASCAR, the drivers, the tracks, people like that, that work at the racetrack every weekend. And to them, at the time at least, the entertainment team, it was sort of like these, slick LA guys, kind of tourists, right? Like you
Yeah.
pop in to the cool races, you fly in, you walk people around, show them the sport, you fly out. You're not getting sweaty, you're not doing anything dirty. You're never at the tiny little racetrack in Martinsville, Virginia, and you're not at
Right.
Bristol, Tennessee. Like you're at Daytona for the 500, and you're in LA, and you go to Sonoma every year, so you can go, take people out to wineries and then show up to the racetrack for a couple of laps and then leave before the race
Yeah.
starts. That was the perception. And in some ways, I had to move to Charlotte, and I had to show them that like I'm here, I'm committed.
Yeah.
Whatever you need me to do, and it took a lot of years before I went from the guy who was the entertainment guy to somebody who had some value to the league that people felt like I'd kind of proven myself. I had taken my lumps. Um, there's no hazing, but it was sort of that feeling like, all right, I've proven myself. I belong
Yeah.
here. And I think by the time that I left, I felt like I could go out to any track, I could talk to anybody in the sport, and they believed that I sort of belonged, which was as much of an accomplishment for me as anything that I did and anything my teams did. Was just like being able to be an outsider, so clearly an outsider. But by the time that my time at NASCAR was up, be kind of part of the family to the point that I still keep in touch with officials
Yeah.
and senior members of the NASCAR team that when I started wanted nothing to do with me,
Yeah.
but now I consider friends. But also going from a world where at Edelman I was managing two or three people at my start at NASCAR. I think I had one person on my team, and I think by the time I left the LA office, I had two. To when I left the sport, I had 70. I
Wow.
went from having no budget, just kind of like business development, trying to create projects, to having budget in the 7 and 8 figures. So
Yeah.
um, a pretty large swing in terms of responsibility, in terms of what I did every day. That had me sort of, you go from having to think about what do I need to do to make this little thing successful, to now what do I need to do to make my team successful. I can't do
Yep.
everything. I can't be on every call. I can't know everything that's going on. How do I empower people to do the job that they're supposed to do, and trust that things are going well, and make sure that if things are not going well, I'm going to hear about it. I'm going to be able to react to it. I'm going to give them the support that they need. I can manage up. I can manage down. I can manage across. That was a pretty difficult transition, but it's a transition not everybody has to make, right? You don't have to be a manager in our business to be successful and have a long
Right.
career. But certainly for the path that I wanted to be on, for what I thought my skill set was, I needed to be managing people. I needed to be managing departments, and it's an incredible learning experience that now to this day at the Athletic, I spend 95% of my time managing people, managing process, not getting to actually do the work myself, but managing the pieces around it. And if I'm successful at that, the company has a good chance of being successful. And it's a pretty big mind shift. But for me, it's always felt way more natural than kind of being in the muck myself.
Yeah. So let's dig into the athletic because I'm fascinated by it. In 2019, you left NASCAR. Obviously, you'd built up quite a reputation there. You'd built this team. You were the VP of content, and you started athletic as a VP and general manager. Why? Why make the jump?
I'd love to say it was because I was, getting calls from the Athletic, and they gave me an offer that I couldn't refuse, but it was my wife. I'm married to somebody in the sports industry, and she was working for the Charlotte Hornets at the time, and she got a call from the Golden State Warriors, and they offered her a job to go manage their JP Morgan Chase account as they were opening up the Chase Center, so the
Yeah.
biggest naming rights deal at the time in sports, and she was going to get to manage that partner. And there's no way that I could have done my job managing 70 people, most of whom were based in Charlotte, North Carolina, from San Francisco. And I certainly wasn't going to live in Charlotte while my wife lived in the Bay Area. So had to make the tough decision that, for my wife to get to do something that's a once in a lifetime opportunity, a dream job for her, and a really cool opportunity. I'm going to leave the sport that I love and a job that I was valued at and
Yeah.
was getting paid to do. And I'm going to leave. I'm going to move to the Bay Area with her, and I'm just going to figure it out. And it was a risk, but I felt like 15 years into my career in the sports industry, the network that I had, I was going to find something, and I was going to find something that was pretty good. And I was able to, through the years, meet a couple of the investors in the athletic through the sports industry. And so Deepan Parikh, who runs Courtside Ventures, which is a sports VC firm, went to the University of Maryland, somebody who I met in the industry and got a friendship with. And I called him the day that Maggie had accepted the job with the Warriors. And I said, buddy, I'm going to have to leave the athletic. Sorry, I'm going to have to leave NASCAR. I'm going to move to the Bay Area. You got to help
Yeah.
me. And you invested in this company called The Athletic, and can you introduce me to anybody over there, because I got to figure this out. And he introduced me to Alex Mather and Adam Hansman, the two founders. And I don't know what he said to them, but he said something, this guy works in content, he knows sports. And The Athletic at the time had a pretty small HQ group. I mean, it was a ton of writers, a ton of editors, but
Yeah.
very few people who were on the business side, who, especially on the business side, thinking about content. Plenty of people who were engineers and product people, but not that many people who kind of knew the business side of
Hmm.
media. And he gave me that introduction, and I was able to convince them that there was a job that they didn't know that they needed, and that I was the right person to fill it. And I got lucky that, a month after leaving NASCAR and moving to the Bay, I was joining the Athletic as their first GM. And now 2.5 years later, that I can't say this was the master plan. If Maggie hadn't gotten the job at the Warriors, there's no way that this thing would have ever probably happened. But a decision that neither of us have looked back on.
It's a great answer, but all I keep thinking of is, damn, I should have interviewed your wife.
Yeah, 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 and you
No,
should.
I'm just
You should.
kidding.
No, look. Everybody who's ever met her likes her better than they like me. So
I'm only playing, trust me.
I'm not playing. I'm telling you the truth. People tolerate me so they can hang out with her.
Same for me. I have the same situation in my household, and I hope she's listening right now and knows that I said that about her. So when you change companies, especially when you spent a lot of time at NASCAR and you've experienced their culture, you know how that's going to exist, and you switch to a new one. That's a lot of changes in culture and
Yeah.
style and process and community and strategy. Like, what were your big eye-opening moments when you first started to dig into this journey at the Athletic, which in this phase was still a little bit more of a startup almost?
Going from the South, from North Carolina to the Bay Area, going from a company that was 75 years old to a company that was 3 or 4 years old,
Yeah.
going to a company that had every single process already built, every department full, anything that you needed in NASCAR, you could snap your fingers and somebody knew where it was or how to do it, right? Like the kind of the backbone of the sport, the office people that kind of make NASCAR work. I got to travel here. How do I do it? Where do I stay? I need this document. Who's got it? I need this budget. What is it going to be? Like, there's somebody for everything over there.
Yeah.
It's a really well established, massive organization. The Athletic had none of that.
Hmm.
What's my budget? What do you need to spend? Like, tell us what you want to spend. We'll figure out if we can get you the money. I got to travel here. How do I do that? Well, just book a ticket. You're an adult. Like, you can figure it out, right? There's a lot of
Yeah.
that stuff that just
Yeah.
didn't exist. And maybe I got soft in my 8 years at NASCAR, just having all of this help and support that a startup doesn't have. But the speed at NASCAR that things move is a lot slower, right? NASCAR is a sport that's owned by a family, and it has a lot of constituents. It has the racetracks, the drivers, the teams, the league itself, the broadcast partners. If you want to do something, you got to get everybody on the same page, and it could take days, weeks, months, years to get the consensus that you need to make any kind of meaningful change for the sport. At the Athletic, a lot of the work that I've done in my 2.5 years at the company, it was the first time that anybody had ever done it. There wasn't a blueprint for it. I didn't have to
Yeah.
ask permission. It was just like, hey, I got this idea. Well, we don't know how to do that, so just go figure it out. Or you want to change this to that, go for it, because there's no reason why we were doing it this way before. We just did it this way. So there's not
Yeah.
like this scar tissue of, well, we don't do it that way. Um, so everything moves a lot faster here, and it definitely took me some time to adjust to having to go through, layer upon layer of approvals. Even as a senior member of the NASCAR team, there was just a lot of stuff that you needed to get people to buy in on to make sure it's going to be successful. You need to get, people had to kind of get behind your ideas. To the Athletic, where when I started, I was a one-man team. Hey, we should, one of the small projects I did my first year was Best of the Athletic.
Hmm.
There's the 3-year-old company. They hadn't done a best of. So at the end of the year, you put out 50,000 pieces of content, and I thought,
Hmm.
oh, we should do best of. Like, it hadn't been done. So there wasn't anything of like, well, this is how we do it, or this is who you have to talk to, or this is the process. It's like, all right, well, I'm the only person on my team. Now it's up to me to figure this out. And not that that was like a hugely successful, amazing thing that'll live until, I'm 100 years old. But it just, for me, was kind of emblematic of, if I want to do something like that in NASCAR, I was putting together a business plan. I
Yeah.
was selling it into my boss, who was selling it to her boss, who was then going to the race teams, going to the track, going to, the
Hmm.
broadcast partners, going to the France family that runs the sport, and getting everybody to buy in, and then, massaging the plan until, like, probably 3 years later we would have made it happen.
Yeah.
And in a month we had the Best of the Athletic, and now we do it to this day. It just, like, the speed that a startup moves, the speed that a media company has to move, when every single day we're having to put out content. You don't realize, when you're at a sport like NASCAR, we always used to complain that there's really not much of an off season. NASCAR basically runs from February until November,
Yeah.
and the sport is always, everybody's tired by the end of the year. Like, you're racing every single week, but you're not racing every single day. You're not racing every single minute of every day. When you're at a media company like the Athletic, today there's Champions League being played. There's baseball getting ready for
Hmm.
the playoff race. The NBA started doing, in-person media events yesterday. NHL is in, the preseason. You've got women's soccer, and you've got the MLS, and you've got, like, Ryder Cup was this weekend. There's a boxing match and a UFC
Yep.
match this weekend. There's never a time where there's nothing going on. Seven
Right.
days a week. Thanksgiving, Christmas, your birthday, it doesn't matter. We are creating content. We are putting out stories. And the speed that this business moves is way faster than anything else I've experienced.
So let's talk philosophically about content. If you want content from The Athletic as a user, you pay for it. And whether that's the main site, podcasts, verticals by sport, geography, you name it. And I'm here for it. I paid for newspapers and magazines and everything growing up because that's what I wanted for the content. That's what I demanded. If I wanted to read Lee Montville, Frank DeFord, Sally Jenkins, I was paying for it, right?
Right.
But how hard is that to maintain in today's media landscape when there's so much out there for free?
It's difficult. It means that everything that we produce has to be better than anything you can get for free, right? Because we're telling you that something that you've been getting for free for a lot of people their entire lives, right? Like, yeah, you knew that you had to pay for content if you were going to read Sally Jenkins. Like, that wasn't going to be for free. Frank DeFord, if you were going to get, Sports Illustrated or
Sports
whatever to your
Illustrated, yep.
house, like, you had to pay for it.
Yep.
And that was fine. But for the last 20 years, if you went to ESPN or CBS or Yahoo or Fox Sports or any of
It's
those
all
things, you're
right
getting
there.
content for free,
Yep.
and you're getting good content, right? It's not crap. You're getting to read really talented people every day talk about the sports that you love. And for the Athletic to work, we have to say that we're going to give you better content than they're going to give you. We're going to get you more personalized content than they're going to give you. We can tell stories that they'll never be able to tell, because we don't have the same advertiser pressure. We don't have the same page view pressure that a lot of other media companies have. And so we can have a writer go off and do something really ambitious that ESPN might say, hey, we need you to write the game that was just played. It was Monday Night Football. Like, go write the game story. We can say, don't write the game story, because everybody else is going to write the game story. Why
Yeah,
don't you
yeah.
go
It's
and,
out there.
you know, find something interesting that nobody else is talking about? Maybe there's something that happened last night that everybody writing the game story would have missed because they're on deadline. They're trying to get the story out. And you can just sit there in the back and you can wait until you have the right moment to ask the right question. You can put the story out 2 days later and it's still okay for us. Um, you can go way deeper, because we're not just about having to write the story with the big bold faced name. There's always that kind of knock on a lot of our competitors that, if it's not about LeBron
Not about
James,
LeBron.
then
Yeah.
nobody cares about it, right? Like
Yep.
then it's never going to be there. And our NBA writers don't have to write about LeBron James. I mean, they write about him a lot. He's, maybe the best basketball player to
Right.
ever
He's
live,
worthy
right? So
about writing about, but
you should
not
probably write
everything.
about him.
Yeah.
Right. But if there's a really good story about, I don't know, Brooke Lopez, go for it. Because if
Yeah.
it's a good enough story and you believe in it and you put your time into it, then fans of that team are going to find it to be interesting and they're going to want to read it. And that's kind of the battle every day. How do we make sure that we create content that's differentiated, content that's better, content that shows you that there is value, that your money's going to something that's paying these salaries and allowing this company to survive. Um, and then the flip side of that is how do we get people to find it? We've had to spend a lot of time adjusting the way that we create content, the way that we distribute content to make sure that at the end of the day, people are able to find our content and read it. Because if you are just told that there's this company called The Athletic and you have to pay for the content, you're going to say, well, screw that. I'm not going to pay for it. But if you can see something, if something ends up in your feed or on Twitter or Instagram or wherever, and you give it a sample, maybe you'll say, okay, well, this is a little bit different. And we've been creating a lot more free content over the last year because we know that we need to get people over to our site. So the
Yeah.
game story from last night, everybody's got it. We don't have to do the game story any different than everybody else. Let's just do the game story. So if you can go find, if you're looking for like a 300 word who won the game,
Mhm.
you can go to the Athletic for it. But it's going to be linked to all these deeper pieces of content that nobody else is going to have. And the hope is that you come to us because you want to find out who won the game. Was it the Cowboys or the Eagles? So you Google that. Oh, the Athletic wrote about it. You read 300 words. That's similar to what everybody else read, and then you see that there's some deep dive story into Jalen Hurts and something
Yeah.
that happened in his past or that he's working on, whatever the hell the story is. And you say, oh well, the Athletic has Zach Berman and Bo Wolf as the guys writing for the Eagles, and they're really interesting guys. And look, this story is interesting. I'm gonna click on it. I gotta pay for it, but it looks like it's something that I want. There's a deal. I'm gonna pay for it, and then 3 years later, you're reading the Athletic, you got money coming into our bank accounts, or the company account,
Yeah.
and you don't even care. Like this is money well spent
Totally worth it
because
to you. Yeah.
you don't walk into a Subway and say, I want a sandwich and expect not to pay for it, right? Like, we're all
Yep.
used to paying for things that we want. And if we can give you content that you want, our hope is that you never think twice about the money that you have to pay for it. And you'll think it's a bargain.
The Athletic has an amazing roster of writers at this point. And I wonder, as I see that happening and I see these names that I've grown up reading and seen on other places and now that are at the Athletic as a landing point, I wonder if the model is a selling point to them where they feel like their work is actually being valued differently and that it is like, no, I'm putting work out there and people are paying for it and there is an exchange here. And that speaks to me. And I wonder to myself, like, is that a recruiting tool almost to say to them, like, hey, we value your work and we're going to make people pay to see it?
We tell any writer that we're recruiting that this is where they get to do their best work. We're going to
Yeah.
have you work with some of the best editors. We're not going to tell you how many words you need to put on the page. If you want an article to be 1,000 words or if you want it to be 4,000 words, as long as it's good, go for it. If you need to take a little extra time on a story and you tell us I'm working on something big, so I can't do anything else for the next week, great, go for it. Like put your
Yeah.
time in and make sure that you're doing the best work. We're going to give you data every single day that shows you what worked and what didn't so you can continue to hone your craft. You're going to get to work with all these other great reporters. You think about like our baseball staff. Ken Rosenthal is one of the best
Amazing.
journalists. He's the guy's incredible.
I love
And
Ken.
he's
Yeah.
also one of the best teammates that you can imagine, right? This is somebody who could be a jerk if he wanted to be, right? He's got, a million plus followers. He's on TV on MLB Network and Fox every single week. And everybody in the industry knows him and feeds him information and everything like that. And he's the guy who's out there calling the youngest reporter on a beat and saying, "Hey, what are you hearing?" Or "I've got this piece of information that would be helpful for you." Or "Let's collaborate on a project." Or "I love that piece that you just wrote. I'm going to share it out." That's a huge selling point for us. And it's a company of 600 people, 450 or so are in the newsroom. In the US, that's probably about, 300 plus people in the newsroom. You get to work with some of the best talent in all of sports journalism. They're your teammates. You can collaborate with them on projects, or you can just read them every day, like I do. And either way, it's really cool for our writers to be teammates with Ken Rosenthal and
Oh yeah.
teammates with Mike Sando and teammates with Meg Linehan and all these people who you just think of like, wow, I would pay to read them, and now I get to
Hmm.
work with them every day. It's pretty cool.
It is. It is. And you started to mention social media there for a second. As a content driven site, you're trying to get eyeballs, obviously. Social media is an incredibly valuable channel for you to help amplify your brand. In the last year, you've put a big focus on building out that social media team. So let's lean into that for a second.
Mhm.
First off, what's the result been like? As you started to invest more in that channel and that amplification, are you seeing the results you would have expected?
We are, the kind of the strategy for social in the early days of the company was let's give our writers a link to their story and have them push it out. It'll be paywalled and people will have to click on it and they'll either pay for it or they
Make
won't.
a choice. Yep.
Make a choice. But you don't need to invest a lot from the corporate accounts because at the end of the day, everybody's getting their articles. If you're already a subscriber, you're getting your articles in your feed. And if you're not a subscriber, you're probably seeing it from other readers or from the writers themselves. So let's just not invest in the corporate accounts. We realized pretty quickly that wasn't the right strategy. That in order for us to continue to grow, we had to create content specifically for social that got people interested in the brand of the Athletic, that
Hmm.
got people interested in the types of content that we were creating, so that they would click those links and they would say, okay, now I'm going to pay for it. And a lot of what we do now is create content that is not just saying, here's a great article that was written by Stephen Nesbitt or Jason Jenks or Dana O'Neill. Click on it and pay us money, but it's this is what's going on in sports today. This is what happened in the game. This is a really cool nugget that one of our reporters got from a press conference that there's no article about it, but we're going to just show you this little piece of information that you're going to think is cool. Here's data that you might want to sink your teeth into that you can read as a tweet or as an Instagram post and not click into anything, but feel like you got some really good information.
Yeah.
And then we say, as we build up our audience, as we get more engagement, now here's this Dana O'Neill piece. Like today, she has a great story on Hubert Davis and North Carolina basketball team. Well, to get you to click on that, we need to get people into our ecosystem who just care
Right.
about the kind of content that we're creating, and they're going to click on things that are free. They're going to click on things that are meant to be consumed in social, and every once in a while they're going to click on things with a paywall. And we think that that will get you to be more likely to pay for the content that is really of value. It's been a big shift. It's certainly been an adjustment for our staff that in the early days, our accounts were we had an account for every city that we were in. And they were just pushing out every single piece of content that we put out. We don't send out fewer pieces of content today, but we just do it in a very different way. We frame it up differently. We're choosier about what we put out, when we put it out, how we put it out. And it's proving out to work that we've doubled our social traffic over the last year in terms of following engagements through the roof. Again, it's been an adjustment for our staff, but we're getting more people into our ecosystem. We're building the funnel, and that's a necessary element for us in order to continue to grow the business.
No, it totally makes sense. So when you're structuring this team and you're trying to figure out what those assets are, I mean, we have a lot of people in our audience that are like, "Oh, social media, I love that creative side." What are you looking for as you start to build out this team? Like, what are those things that you go to market and say, "When I'm hiring and I'm building out this staff, these are the attributes I want to have. This is how somebody would fit in with our group and our team and where we're headed as a unit."
We approach social slightly differently than a lot of our competitors. We're not clickbait. We can't be. We have to have journalism be at the top of everything that we do. Our quality bar is really high. There's a bit of a trend now that people, a lot of social accounts in our industry are about the kind of the coolest video that you could find that may not be sports related, right? It's
Yep.
the 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 guy jumping off of a building with a parachute, and you see it on every account, or it's the fan at the Buffalo Bills game jumping through a table. And you go to every account, and I don't have to tell you what those accounts are. You probably know them. You see them in your feed, and I'll see every day the same exact video from five
Hmm.
or six different companies in a day. We don't want to do that. It's not our brand. Our brand is journalism. Our brand is long form content from some of the best in the world. So when we're hiring for that, we need to find people who understand social, who understand how quickly you need to move, how you can frame things up for people to be interested in them, but above all else, understand quality and what is the athletic and what's not. This is the type of thing that we'll engage in. This is the stuff that we aren't going to touch. That to us is really important. And anybody who comes in here has to understand how we create content, what our voice is, what our readers are looking for, and we're not going to grow as fast as some of the others because we're not going to have videos that are incredibly sticky. We don't have sports rights, so we're not going to be able to like
Yeah.
put out highlights all day, and we're not going to put out videos that have nothing to do with our content, nothing to do with sports. So we kind of hamstring ourselves in a little bit of a way because of that. But I believe that if you follow the Athletic, every post that we put out there has some value to, some nutritional value that, okay, I learned something, or this was interesting or educational or whatever, you're interested in. Um, that you're getting something from everything that we do, and it's at the same bar as our journalism, because the last thing that we would want is, you're reading this incredible piece of content that somebody spent days and weeks and months putting together. Dana's piece today, that's like unbelievable journalism. And if we can't match her work with a social post that can represent what she put out there, then we're doing a disservice to our own staff. We're doing a disservice to our brand. So everybody we bring in needs to know that quality is the number one thing. We can be a little bit later than everybody else. Take an extra minute, make sure that
Mm-hmm.
nothing's misspelled, make sure you're not making mistakes, because we can't sully the name of the Athletic, the quality bar that we've set. Otherwise, we're doing a disservice to everything, and the business isn't going to grow.
I love the respect you give the internal stakeholders and the audience themselves, and saying, like, no, we have to push out quality and we have to represent their stories well. We have to make sure we do this the right way. And that's the only way we can carve out our own separate niche. And I love that. I wish more people would have that mentality, especially as it comes to social. So in the last 2 years, we've all been talking about the change in audience behavior, right? Everybody's changing. Actually, it's more than the last 2 years. It's forever. It's been changing to mobile experiences. And then through the pandemic, as things shifted that way and more people were at home, and et cetera, et cetera. As you go through, and you mentioned data before, about as you go through and you can give feedback and information to your reporters and your writers and to say, like, hey, this is what's working. What are you kind of figuring out about the change in audience behavior, and what is working, and what is that kind of magic box of content right now? What are those things that are in demand?
Something that we've learned over the last, I'd say, year or so, is that in the early days, people came to us for the long form, and they were probably going to CBS and ESPN and Yahoo and Bleacher and Barstool and everybody else, and they were getting a lot of different content. And then they come to the Athletic when they've got 20 minutes and they want to really sink their teeth into something pretty meaty. But over time, that shifted, and people don't want to have multiple sports apps on their phone. They want to go to one place and they get as much information as possible. So we found that a lot of the short form content that we're creating now has different utility than it would have had in the early days of the business, when people just never would think about us for that.
Hmm.
And the daily battle that we face is, how do you make sure that you keep quality high? How do you make sure that you keep people reading the really important journalism that we're creating, while also giving them the score that they're looking for, right? You don't want anybody to open up the app and say, oh, I can't find out who won the game
Who
last
won?
night.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to a different app, right? Because if you go to a different app and now you go to Yahoo to go find out who won, then you're not spending time in our app and you're not going to read the important piece of journalism, right? If you want to just say, I like, there was a press conference today, LeBron, today said something around that he's vaccinated, and that it was important for him and his family. And maybe you just want that little news, like, oh, LeBron was talking about vaccinations. I'm going to go look at what he said. If the Athletic doesn't have it, you're going to go somewhere else and you're going to find it.
Right.
And
Right.
so we've tried to become more of a one-stop shop for sports fans,
Serve
while
the
not
sports fan
compromise
wherever they are. Yeah.
while not compromising the high quality long form journalism that sort of built us. And that's, I'd be lying, Brian, if I said that that's easy, because every
Oh
single
yeah.
day you've got, so much space in the app. You've got, our writers only have so much time. We only have so much budget, so much mind share. Editors only have so much time. Like, how do you prioritize? Do you want somebody focused on this 3,000 word investigative piece of journalism that took forever? Or do you want them focused on this little piece of content? Reality is we have to figure out a way to do both, and it's not simple, but it's what we need to do in order to continue to engage our subscribers, sports fans, that at the end of the day, they just want information. They don't really care where it comes from. They just want to know what's going on. They want to be educated. They want to be entertained. They want to be, they want to be able to go sit at a sports bar and talk to their friends and know what's happening in the entire world of sports.
I'm getting stressed out just thinking of the scope of your job, man. You got a lot coming on your plate. That's crazy.
But we've got the best journalists in the world, right? Like,
That
my
helps. That's a good
job,
starting point.
the more that my team stays out of the way and just says, what do you need, how can we help,
Yeah.
the better our business is. And
Yeah.
if I tell everybody on my team when they start, they could fire every single one of us. And if you take Ken Rosenthal and Dana O'Neill and Meg Linehan and James Myrtle and all these big names that we have on our staff, and you give them a Tumblr blog and they get to write their stuff and put it out there, people are going to pay for it. But
Yeah.
if all those guys leave, and you got a bunch of people who look like me sitting around with this slick app that has all these bells and whistles. Nobody wants that, right?
Right.
They're coming for the journalism, and we need to make sure that every single day the journalism is what shines, and that our job is just to make sure that our writers have an easier chance of putting out good work because we're giving them every single tool that they need to be successful.
It's amazing. No, and it makes sense that it all comes together, both parts of the business. We have a lot of, as I mentioned, we have a lot of young people in the audience. We'll finish up with this, and I'm so respectful of the time that you've given us. This amazing conversation. We have a lot of young people in our audience trying to find their path, trying to discover where they want to go. A lot of people that love the content and journalism side, but hey, competition's high for these jobs. You don't start out of the gate being Ken Rosenthal. In your perspective, having been through it, having worked with a lot of different reporters and writers and people coming up on this side of the content and journalism side of the sports industry, how would you talk to somebody if you were talking to a college group, or you were talking to a young person that came up to you and said, hey, this is what I want to do? What kind of advice would you give?
So I think, it's a good question, Brian. There are two major things. One, your network is paramount in the sports industry. Probably is in a lot of industries, but sports in particular. You have to meet people. You have to stay in touch with them. You have to engage with them often because that's where you're going to get your opportunities. Every time we post a job, we get hundreds, if not thousands, of resumes. Nobody can go through all of them. You're not going to be able to find the needle in the haystack. So, it always helps to know people who can kind of get you in front of the right people and help advocate for you and get your foot in the door. So I think that's number one. Number two is it's never been easier to create content. And so if you're somebody who wants to be a journalist, when you were coming up, if the radio station didn't want you and a newspaper didn't want you and a magazine didn't want you and a TV station didn't want you, what the hell were you going to do?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Trust me. I
You had
had
no
those
chance.
fears. You're
Right.
giving me
So
chills just thinking about it again.
when I was in college, I was putting together demo tapes I was going to send out because if I didn't
Yep.
get a job, and I didn't, but if I wasn't able to get a job as a journalist by my tape, I had no ability to create my own content. And now you could start a blog, you could
Yeah.
get, build a Twitter account, you can get a YouTube account, you can get a Facebook account, an Instagram account, a TikTok account, a Snapchat account. There's so many things that you can do to create content on your own. And you need to get reps and you need to build your audience. I mean, for our business, it really helps if you already have an existing audience. So when you create content, there are people there who want to read it. And if you are waiting for that chance to go work for an ESPN or a Bleacher or the Athletic, if you're saying I have to wait until I'm there in order for me to actually go out there and nobody wants to read my stuff, so I'm just gonna be dormant and just wait till I get that job, you're not going to get the job. And if you
Right.
did get the job, you're not going to be able to, entertain an audience because you don't have one. So start your own blog, start a podcast, get a Twitter account, and do whatever you need to do to start showing people, get reps, hone your craft, and get your name out there. And you can build. There are plenty of people who are completely self-made in this. I think about, there's a guy, Kendall Baker, who does the newsletter for Axios Sports. I don't know the story backwards and forwards, but from what I gather, at one point he decided that he wanted to write a newsletter. He put it together on his own and was able to little by little through elbow grease build up to a meaningful audience. And then Axios comes, and now he's got this massive national platform. It wasn't like they didn't pick this guy who like had every advantage and everything to create newsletters. He did it on his own. We have a lot of writers like that started off somewhere small and little by little they've kind of fought their way up. And so if you're just going to sit around and wait for your opportunity, it's probably not going to come. There's never been an easier time to create content on your own for your own channels, build a small audience, and then get your name out there. And little by little, it can compound to the point where somebody in the industry is going to be looking at you to bring you on board.
Evan, amazing conversation. Sports Business Journal, 40 under 40, something I will never, ever achieve. So congratulations to you on that, by the way.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming on and sharing so much more of your story and journey. So thank you so much for coming on.
Brian, it was a lot of fun. I appreciate you having me on.